Good morning. My name is Henry Huitrago. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at the Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today for another Power Breakfast event. I want to let you know that this event is going to be recorded for sharing later on social media. Please remember to add your name or company name on your Zoom profile, and make sure you have your video on and your microphone mute. If you have a question for today's speaker, please send it via private message to our CEO, Jason Abeg. If you are having any technical issues, please reach out to me through chat. Now, to introduce our speaker for today, here's Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce CEO, Jason Abeg.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Henry. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jason Abeg. I'm CEO of the Greater Saskatoon Chamber. The Chamber team and many of you are participating today from Treaty 6 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis people. As a chamber, we honor our community's Indigenous ancestry and commit to growing a Saskatoon rooted in shared success and respectful relationships and true reconciliation. And if, of course, you're joining us from other parts of the province today, a warm welcome to you and thank you for being here. So I don't have to tell many of you that when you're a mid-sized city in the middle of the Canadian prairies, the airport is a vital link for Saskatoon business people to connect with clients and customers everywhere else. And if rail or roads are a bit too slow, it provides a pathway to get products to end customers faster. More than that, though, it also supports our quality of life and tourism economy here in a city, giving us chances to get away on holidays and welcome visitors from away as well. So travel restrictions and concerns spawned by the COVID-19 pandemic effectively shut down Canada's airports, with those in the mid-market category most negatively affected. While airports remain open and operational, people have not yet felt totally psychologically safe to travel, and passenger volumes have dropped to lows never before seen. As we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic and the business and travel activity resumes, what is the state of our air services in Saskatoon? To what extent has COVID impacted our airport, and is there a path to recovery? And what can we expect in terms of services and routes going forward? To that end, we're very pleased to welcome Stephen Mayberry, President and CEO of the Saskatoon Airport Authority, to address these questions and give us some insight into the current and future state of air service in Saskatoon. Stephen began his air transportation career in 1994 in commercial aviation and later transitioned into the airport business. He worked with various airports across Canada, including the Greater Toronto Airports Authority, Charlottetown Airport Authority, and Southport Aerospace Centre, Inc. In 2012, Stephen assumed his leadership role here and has been working to deliver Canada's most valued airport experience. Stephen holds graduate degrees in civil engineering and international aviation, as well as professional accreditations as an airport executive and international trade professional. So Stephen, it is our great pleasure to welcome you here today. You have been a man on a mission for the last year and change. We know you're terribly busy, but we appreciate your time. Let me turn things over to you and we'll take it from there. Stephen.
Good morning, Jason. Good morning, everybody. And thank you for taking the time today to view our presentation regarding the future of air service in Saskatoon. I want to thank Henry too in advance. Henry, if we can advance the next slide, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Today's presentation reports on our unique 2020 activities by doing a couple things. By reiterating our role as a Canadian Airport Authority, by discussing our response to the impacts of the COVID pandemic, and finally, by highlighting our short-term recovery plans. This is what I intend to cover today for you. Next, Henry. Thank you. The Saskatoon Airport Authority is a private, not-for-profit corporation employing a user-pay business model that reinvests any surplus cash flow back into the airport's continued viability. As an essential node in the air transportation network, we facilitate trade, we bring visitors to Saskatchewan's tourism sector, and we enable economic development by connecting Saskatchewan to the world. We are dedicated to supporting Canada's economic recovery by continuing to move cargo and vaccines right now through our airport and ensuring that emergency medical organizations can provide life-saving services. We operate under a long-term federal lease. It has prescriptive public accountability principles, and we make tax-based payments to the City of Saskatoon and rent payments to the federal government. Those rent payments are based on a very unique commission formula that captures a percentage of our gross revenue. Next. This slide deals with the COVID pandemic and the devastating impact it's had on passenger demand and aircraft seats. That's important because there are two primary business drivers. For the full year in 2020, passenger demand and aircraft seats in comparison to 2019 were down 69% and 60% respectively. For the COVID impacted months of April through December, passenger demand and aircraft seats were down 87% and 77% respectively. Accordingly, we entered a very dire situation as revenue was decimated, pandemic expenses escalated, our planned capital investments were stifled, and government support was desperately needed as profound enterprise risk was created in terms of free cash flow, pandemic cycles, travel restrictions, quarantine measures, airline route reductions, and a reduced economic propensity to travel in general. In 2020, we funded our resultant financial operating losses with new and accumulating debt, while remarkably, and we are proud of this, maintaining highly competitive airport rates and charges. Because when you think about levers, those are one that airports can use and we have not. Next. Directly correlated with passenger demand, we continue to absorb highly damaging impacts to our network seat capacity, which is really the topic today. That's down 80.3% in the first quarter of 2021 in comparison to 2019. You'll notice that our base year is 2019 in industry. Furthermore, in the month of March, we experienced an 84.5% reduction in seat capacity. Some examples here. Air Canada now has 93 departing flights. That's versus 388 flights in 2019 for that month. WestJet has 68 flights versus 451 in 2019. Forward looking and based on the April air service schedule, we are forecasting another 2.5% decline in seat capacity on a month-over-month. The restart of these flights will be absolutely key to an effective recovery of air access for our community when it is safe to do so. Next. Our response absolutely impacted our business plan. Our COVID response strategy has been compassionate, comprehensive, systematic, and iterative through a progressive and exhaustive series of cost efficiencies. With a resonant vision to be Canada's most valued airport experience, collaboration continues to be our key success factor as a guest-centric business that ensures your experience while being hosted at our airport instills confidence in your return to the skies, of course, when it is safe to do so. Next. Our contingency initiatives progressively sought financial viability through all levels of government expense relief, reduced contract services, workforce changes, reconfigured assets and facilities, and deferred capital investments. In 2020, governmental relief was limited to federal support, including the broad Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program, which we were grateful to receive and leverage. However, sectoral support was unfortunately restricted to federal rent relief, which again, while we were grateful for, as I mentioned previously, that is inherently calculated based on gross revenue, which plummeted, and therefore only accounted for a very small percentage of our operating costs. While we were fortunate to maintain adequate liquidity to continue operating, 2020 has resulted in historical debt accumulation to fund our ongoing operations. In terms of traveler confidence, our guest experience has been adapted dramatically with respect to cleaning protocols, contactless departure processes, traffic flow, hand sanitization, plexiglass partitions throughout the terminal, including pre-board screening. We also completed upgrades to our air ventilation system, installed new ultraviolet handrail sanitization technology on our escalators, and are currently contemplating COVID screening for international travelers in the capacities of antigens, antibodies, PCR testing, and vaccination proofing. To that end, we're proud to say in the near future, we do plan to trial a COVID testing pilot project at the airport to better understand the related processes and assess the value this may add to our guests' airport experience. So you'll notice all of these changes to the airport experience as you travel through our airport and others. Next. Some additional responses. We were proud to be recognized in 2020 by Airports Council International for attaining the airport health accreditation. This is important because it aligns all of those health measures I just spoke to with industry best practices in the areas of cleaning and disinfection, physical distancing, staff protection, physical layout, passenger communications, and passenger facilities. Additionally, the Accessible Transportation for Persons with Disabilities regulations also came into effect in June of 2020 while we were dealing with the pandemic. To ensure a successful integration, a third-party audit compared our current processes to the new regulatory requirements. And we were so pleased to subsequently receive certification under the Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Program in 2020. This is a national rating system that certifies the level of meaningful access and therefore directly supports our ongoing goal to improve the accessibility of our building environment. And the last item I have on this slide is something you may have heard in the media, which is international designation for the airport. In January 2021, we, along with several other airports, were quite surprised to receive a guidance document that's called an advisory circular from our regulator, Transport Canada. This guidance sought to align our requirements with an international recommendation from the International Civil Aviation Organization, so an administrative alignment, if you will. The recommendation imposes the alignment of procedures, administrative actions on the impacted airports, which of course we are one of them, or face the possibility of removal of our international reference, which is stated in aeronautical reference publications. These imposed actions are believed to be able to be satisfactorily met, so we feel quite confident at this point we're going to meet these requirements by the deadline of June 30th, 2021. To summarize then, because I know there have been questions around this represents minimal risk to our airport. It does not impact transborder flights, which are so critical to our market, has no connection to the formal name of our airport, has no impact to the configuration or asset capability of us to welcome aircraft into our market, and has very limited impact on the future air service development opportunities for Saskatoon as we see them now. And again, we feel we're pursuing this actively. We've partnered with Regina Airport on this issue and feel, again, quite confident we're going to meet the requirements. Next slide. Now on to the recovery for the last couple slides. To guide our COVID recovery assessment, we employ a multi-scenario risk analysis, and that's what you're seeing here, the output of that, to develop best, base, and worst cases of passenger demand. As you can see, that depicts a late 2024 return to 2019 passenger levels. So this is a very protracted journey for the Saskatoon airport. While the full duration and scope of the pandemic still remains highly uncertain, we believe the long-term financial viability of the airport will be achieved despite a materially harmful impact to our midterm operations. So our recovery objective is to have a defined path to financial viability, be positioned for the inevitable post-pandemic recovery when it is safe to do so, and get through this together as an organization. Next. And a last slide here. This slide deals with the gap that we're seeing in air service right now from 2019. A rather busy slide, but a lot of good information there that I encourage you to take a look at. The recovery of air service will be a key strategic initiative for the airport, including existing airline route expansions, such as WestJet and Air Canada, as well as restarting Delta and re-welcoming Flair, domestic air service options to our community. Air service recovery, of course, is directly triggered by COVID recovery thresholds, the lifting of public health measures, and guidance when it is safe to do so. We are prepared to be competitively positioned to recapture these capacity cuts in our market, including what we would like to do is, it makes a whole lot of sense, is a domestic-centric initial phase. That means focusing fully on domestic air service, and then looking to international direct and connecting flight introductions over the longer term. Just the last departing slide here. Thank you, Henry. So on behalf of the Saskatoon Airport Authority team, thank you for your attention today, your concern for the airport, and to the Chamber for the invitation. I know we've got some questions ready to go here, but I encourage additional. I've seen a few of them come up on the chat. And I also want to let you know, I believe we have our Vice President of Business Development, CJ Duchinsky, on the call today too. So she's here standing by for the same reason. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you, Stephen. That was just excellent. Thanks for the overview. You know, some of those graphs, some of those some of those indicators are pretty sobering. Just at a very gut level, a very high level, obviously, we've got some recovery that we've got to see happen here. How have the airport's business growth targets changed? You know, obviously you would have had a strategic plan and a business plan going into 2020. Curious to know now how that has been adjusted and sort of what you're looking at in terms of growth goals.
Yeah, excellent question. In a word, completely deconstructed.
Sure.
They were torn down and rebuilt with a COVID response strategy. And that would be similar to all airports across the nation. Growth targets, for an example, in Saskatoon, our prior business plan targets, none of them are the same at this point. So things such as that we were so proud of, look at our history here as a global airport service winner, and for 2 years in a row, most improved and then the best airport in North America. Those service quality initiatives and growth targets no longer exist because you need to adapt and morph them into public health and communicable disease area. So that was the change on that side, to the point of we would have typically 5 major corporate targets. Each year we have 2. It's free cash flow and debt per passenger. So look at the stark change there from sort of a service quality just to financial viability and ensuring you have liquidity to continue. And I mean, the final point, of course, you've heard me speak to capital investments. That's a core thing in what we do here is we invest in assets. We have an airport master plan, and all of that has to change in terms of the projected demand versus the capacity that we need to have at the airport. So all of those have been deferred significantly out, which has an impact on our community as well. We know we have a big economic impact in terms of construction and maintenance of our assets. So the majority of those will be deferred out for years.
You touched on the international designation issue. And of course, that's what grabs headlines. You know, the minute there's a shift and it sounds like there's a material impact to the functioning of our airport and the extent to which it can service international passengers and it can reach international destinations, suddenly that grabs everybody's attention. I want you to just say a little bit more about why it is important. You did say that it presents a minimal risk, which is very reassuring, but it is a designation. It seems to matter to people. Why is that designation then ultimately important if it really presents a minimal risk to the operation of the airport from your point of view?
Yeah, and it does have that connotation associated with it, right? It's a designation. We're so proud of both our brand and being the Saskatoon International Airport. And you're right, that the good part about this is that it does have minimal impact. We are quite sure of that. Even from an air service perspective, this is not something that prevents an airline from coming in. I saw it just in the chat there. Yes, like we lost United Airlines a few years ago on our Denver, Chicago. That does not prevent us from remarketing our community and air services to United Airlines or them coming in to service our community again, or recapturing Delta. So from an air service, which is really the topic today, it really has minimal impact. That said, it is a burden on the team. This is an administrative impact. We're well through proving the capabilities of our airport. And that means really having the facilities to do custom border and services and to welcome these flights into our community. Having approved safety and security programs, these have already been satisfied. Where we are right now is contacting the various government agencies to gather their support as well. And again, I mean, this is just so indicative of Saskatchewan. We're working with our partners in Regina because they're facing the same issue.
I mean, not surprising. You're seeing it in the chat a little bit, and certainly it's coffee row talk all the time, and it's certainly something on the agenda of a lot of boardrooms, you know, in our community, and it all turns on access to sort of key markets. You think about any business in our space that's involved in mining and minerals. Suddenly, you know, Colorado, Denver is essential. That is the epicenter of U.S. mining and minerals technology and corporate development. Same holds true for the commodity groups, access to any of the Midwest states, easier access, really important. So we have some questions about that. Can you give us a sense of what's involved, Stephen, in pitching carriers to establish routes in and out of Saskatoon? What does that really look like? What do you think some of the key factors are? Is it all financial? Is it all passenger? Are there other considerations? What does that look like?
Absolutely, and it's just it's a core role that we play in our primary role as the airport authority. And that is our job, to go out and secure and promote air service to Saskatoon. The airlines are our customers as well as our partners, so understanding their business and creating relationships, just like anything in business, is critical, as well as understanding their needs. We speak primarily with their network planning teams. Network planning teams are the ones that do the analysis of whether that route is both profitable and beneficial to their corporation. And just remember, this is millions of dollars to deploy an aircraft into market. So they really want to de-risk the route. They want to know that it's going to create what they call yields. And that is, you're right, a financial calculation that deems on a per seat or on a per kilometer basis that route will make money for the airline. We need to create the business cases around that. We need to demonstrate to the airlines that it is de-risked, and we also need to demonstrate to them that we're competitive as an airport in terms of rates and supporting them as they either enter or expand in our market.
Yeah, and Stephen, really pardon my ignorance on this. Is that pitch to the airlines? Is that done? It's certainly done, maybe in conjunction with Regina's airport. Do you involve sort of larger corporate employers, entities in this market in trying to advance that case? Does that help at all? Is there any extra oomph that's added to that pitch by virtue of consulting with them or involving them in some way?
There absolutely is. And our air service working group, Jason, which you're a part of, is powerful when it comes to providing information that the airlines do not have. So obviously in the business case, we attempt to provide all of the, the metric is called passengers per day each way. And they look at origin and destination, where people from Saskatoon are flying, where inbound people are coming from, to ensure that they have the most efficient routes that are there. So yes, the uniqueness of that working group has been utilized, has benefited in terms of marketing to our airline partners.
Yeah. Okay. I had a question in the chat about vaccine passports. There's a lot of conversation about this, of course, and we're, Canada is watching at the moment. Other countries formulate policies on this. We haven't yet developed one, I don't think, domestically. What's the industry's view of this? And is there, in your view, a relatively seamless way of integrating vaccine passports into sort of the normal processes that you have to accept and receive passengers?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. We are early right now into the federal government's view on the international side of the equation, as well as the province's view on interprovincial and within Canada. Some of the things that I think do help that are a greater investment in what the recovery looks like in Canada, as well as the airports investing, and you're seeing this across the country, in what we think are going to be the most important parts of passenger expectations around air travel. And that is touchless self-service applications, so contactless flow through the airport. Literally, if you think about a vision, including the vaccine passport equation, of being able to travel from your vehicle to the aircraft in a touchless capacity. And you have to think that through, from concessions to all other things, and whether that's possible. But that is the vision and initial recovery thoughts right now. And airports get it, everyone gets it. The most important thing right now is to get your vaccinations and get everyone safe. Then we need to get back to the sky, and we support the federal government's view on this, which is, let's deal with the issue at hand. That said, there are lots of analyses that are going on at other airports, including ours, on when that recovery occurs and what elements, such as vaccination passports, may offer a benefit.
You sort of touched on it a little bit. We heard a lot about the potential closure of the air traffic control tower in Regina several weeks ago, and that decision did not come to pass, which was, I think, a great relief to certainly Regina and frankly any mid-market airport that might see a risk. What would have been the impact for Regina, Stephen? I know I'm asking you here in Saskatoon that question, but obviously it would have been something on your mind. And are there things that can be done to mitigate the risk of something similar happening here? Or does NAV Canada just get up one day and send a letter to everybody and say, you're on a list for review and deal with it?
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, again, our friends down in Regina, as well as other airports, were initially targeted for this. It's based on a volume threshold. That's the easiest way to really understand this. So by volume, I mean how much air traffic you have there. And doesn't that make sense? And you know, the decision on whether you require an air traffic control tower service is based on the volume of air traffic. And it just so happened that Regina, our friends in Fort Mac and a few other airports, their traffic is down over time and therefore was falling close to or below that volumetric threshold, which caused NAV Canada to do analysis. I believe that analysis is now complete and they're not moving forward with those particular strategic decisions right now. Now, a little bit more on your question. The loss of a control tower does not mean an unattended tower. It just means a different level of service. So in terms of impact to Regina, I mean, honestly, I prefer James to speak to that for his particular market. For Saskatoon's market, we are very fortunate and we're actually very proud to have a much broader portfolio of aircraft traffic. And what I mean by that is we have commercial aviation traffic. We have a cargo hub for the province located here. Cargojet operates out of here. We have a large general aviation and corporate aviation presence here as well. And therefore, our volume of business is much higher than what the concerned NAV Canada would have. So we're busier in terms of air traffic is the simple answer.
Yeah, busier and more diverse set of offerings, and that really is the way to mitigate that kind of risk. That's very positive to hear, actually. You talked a little bit about the touchless experience in airports coming out of COVID. This is likely to stick around. This is likely to be sort of one of those game changers in terms of what COVID has done to us and how we think about our airport experience. Any other changes or improvements to that experience in the wake of the pandemic? And certainly in light of sort of new expectations of passengers, what they might be looking for. Any other changes or improvements in terms of that experience?
There are, yeah, and thanks for asking, because again, we're proud of this. And we have, for example, I've been talking about the departure process, and that is one of the focals, and that includes some pre-board screening as you go through the airport. Our departure area has just gone through a modernization project in which we were set up very well for a quick turn to be nimble and adapt with our airline partners. What do I mean by that? I mean that our new departure area has things such as mobile check-in kiosks now that we've put in. They're common use. Self-serve bag drops, so you no longer have to go to see a customer service agent. You can drop your bag off at this amazing technology that we now have at our airport. And we automated that by working with our partners. You can now check in contactlessly at our kiosks, such that you can use your iPhone to check in. And again, this gives you examples of improvements at our airport, and you will see at other airports to make sure that it is as contactless as possible.
It sure has changed, and it will change. I myself have not been back in an airport in just over a year. I almost forget what it's like to have to navigate that scene, and I imagine it'll be completely different from what I experienced, just 14 or 16 months ago. Let's talk a little bit about where you see the greatest prospects for growth in passenger volumes on the leisure side and on the business side. Specifically, questions around sort of what the world looks like in light of the uptake on online meeting platforms, for example, like Zoom, where maybe the need or demand for business travel might be reduced. That's a conversation that's happening. What's your sense of that? Do you think that is a fundamental shift and will significantly impact business travel through the airport, or not?
Yeah, good question. And I mean, I think it was significant to research it. We've done our analysis around this.
Mm-hmm.
From an industry perspective, we expect both sectors, business, leisure, to recover fully to pre-2019 levels. So based on data, I mean, that months ago, that was anecdotal, but we're seeing data now from industry partners and association. And we've heard this strong pent-up demand. But what we're seeing from our airline partners is they're sharing their advanced future bookings are strong for 2022. So now we're seeing actual data that is proving out that graph that I had showed in the second last that showed our recovery. We've taken that all into consideration. So we don't believe things such as meeting platforms like Zoom will have a major impact, obviously, over the short term. And I think that will continue as various corporations make their changes. But business development needs to continue. And our view is that the airline market will rebound fully for Saskatoon.
That's interesting. That's good to hear, actually. A lot of speculation around this, of course. And obviously it's part of the conversation on sort of return to work and what normal looks like after all of this. So that's very encouraging to hear. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of sort of relief the airport has received to date. Federally, we've seen relief programs extended to businesses in virtually all sectors. My impression is that the airport operators maybe have not been on the receiving end of a lot of that. Can you say a little bit about the sort of supports received to date and what kind of requests you've put to the various levels of government?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been advocating really strong here with the Canadian Airports Council, as well as independently, from a Saskatoon and from a Regina standpoint for the province. So you're right, the COVID relief to this point, as I stated in the presentation, has been minimal. And I think that's a large use of the word. So it's less than 1% of our operating budget that we've been provided support with. And for a market that is just decimated in terms of revenue, there are airports across the country that have contemplated how to keep going, really the viability and sustain the business. That's how dramatic it's been. Our ask came through the fall economic statement. I mean, it was not very positive. There were elements of capital programs that were contemplated at the time. We were waiting for details. We have recently heard of a couple of programs are investing in that process. And one is the Regional Air Transportation Initiative. The other is the Airport Critical Infrastructure Program. These are programs that are contemplating some support, but it's so early in the process. We really can't quantify at this point what type of support we're going to have.
Can you just say a little bit more about those two programs, Stephen? There's the Regional Air Transportation Initiative, you said, and the Airport Critical Infrastructure Program. The infrastructure one sounds like it's directed specifically to capital, so not at all directed to operations or operating budgets, I would imagine. But the Regional Air Transportation Initiative, is that funding at all directed to support operational losses?
There is a component for operational losses, and specifically is not for large capital projects, that particular program. There is an air service component to that too. So again, we're exploring sort of the categories of assistance within these programs and assessing where we would be successful in the application process. And if CJ is on the line, if you have a more detailed question on this program from different sectors within the community, I'm sure she could respond to that as well.
Some good news starting next month. Flair Airlines is resuming flights domestically from Saskatoon to Toronto and Vancouver. Do you want to just say a little bit more about what Flair's offering is all about and how it will support the recovery here that we've talked about?
I think it's going to be tremendous for the recovery. This is the low cost airline model. So this community will be served and has been served by Flair into the Toronto and Vancouver market at remarkably low rates. So I think it's another option with which for this community to access inbound and outbound flights from major hubs in our city. So I think it's a great thing.
All right, if there's any questions from the group, please, direct them to the chat. It'd be wonderful to hear from you. We do have some other questions coming in now. One just now, thanks, Monica. I wonder if you can talk a bit about the impact of COVID on the human resources at the airport, including admin, maintenance, flight support. Has there been any additional training, any work from home options? Will it be difficult to ramp up again? What kind of supports have been provided to staff?
Lots of support. First and foremost, obviously the health and safety. So all of our processes meet provincial guidelines or exceed. And we do have an enhanced protocol at the office. Yes, there are work from home initiatives that are in place. In terms of impacts, it was a very it's a historical impact on our organizational structure. We did restructure. Unfortunately, did have to go through a layoff process. And we continue to adapt in a very cross-functional way. And I think we're working really strong as a team. We are also very, in comparison to other airports in Canada, we're relatively heavily outsourced services. So a lot of contract services that gave us flexibility with which to respond.
Thank you. You've sort of pinned recovery to 2024, which feels a long ways out. And it goes without saying that, the path to 2024 will be paved with the lifting of COVID restrictions. That goes without saying. Any other things that might accelerate that time frame, Stephen, from your point of view? And is there specifically anything that the business community here could do to help certainly this airport recover more quickly than 2024?
Firstly, I think this community does an amazing job in supporting the airport through the Air Service Working Group. Anytime I've been advocating during COVID, I've got full support from province and community. And sorry, the second part of that question was, Jason?
Well, just sort of accelerating that timeline.
Oh, yes.
It feels like it's so far off. We're hearing that, by the way, from tourism operators, from Tourism Saskatoon, 2023, 2024, sort of recovery timelines. But obviously, we're all eager to see a recovery realized much sooner than that. Is there anything that could be done to accelerate that time frame, or that might accelerate it?
It's our view, and I would suggest industry's view as well. It's really the quarantine measures at the end that is the most important threshold with which us to understand when that will be lifted. I did indicate that the airlines are positive on future bookings, so I think that's a good thing. From a community standpoint, though, I don't know what could be done to assist from a quarantine measure. I think that's something for science-based policy to lead. That would be the federal government in general. That said, we'd be anxious to work with the province as well to understand what metrics may be there when it is safe to do so for some domestic travel within Canada.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that's the questions we have from the chat. I've certainly exhausted my list. Perhaps I'll turn things over to Trina now for a couple of giveaways. Go ahead, Trina.
Thank you, Jason. So as a thank you for joining us today, we have a couple draws from 2 local businesses here in Saskatoon. All of you have been entered into our Chamber Master and will automatically draw a winner. If you are the lucky winner, you can stop by the Chamber office and pick up your prize. So the first draw is for a $50 gift card to the 612 Lounge in the Sheraton Cavalier Hotel. And that winner is Heather Morgan. So congratulations, Heather. And the second draw is for a Colony Coffee and Tea gift pack. And that winner is Neil Weber. So congratulations to both of you. And like I said, you can stop by the Chamber office Monday to Friday between 8:30 and 4:30 and pick up your prize. And back to you, Jason.
Thank you, Trina. Well, with that, It leaves me to thank you, Stephen, for your time and insights today. As I said off the top, you're a man on a mission. Your team has had to wrestle with just, dare I say, unprecedented events, risks, developments in your sector. And it's so pivotal that the airport not only be operational, but sustainable for this community, obviously. It's a pathway to the markets that I talked about off the top. It's so essential to all of the work that we do. And so thank you to you and your team for what you've done this past year and what you're doing. And we wish you well. And if there's anything that the business community can do, Stephen, to help either promote or advocate or strengthen your pitch to governments or to airlines, we're on board. So know that we're standing ready to give you a hand if you need it.
Thanks again, Jason.
You bet. And with that, I'll just thank everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. We'll give you a little time back. Take care of yourself and those around you. And we'll see you at another Power Breakfast really soon. Thanks, everyone.